if you understand Bitcoin and you hold Bitcoin, you have won. But you're going to step off the damn hamster wheel, get on board with a new life, and that's what's coming for Bitcoiners. And even a tenth of a Bitcoin going forward for a young person is going to be generational wealth. Bitcoin against gold, it kills it. Bitcoin against treasuries, slays it. Bitcoin against cash, it's not even, there's no sense doing it. Bitcoin against eggs. I mean, There's no place where Bitcoin doesn't just crush everything. I don't see a recession in our future. And the reason is because I believe they are going to.
George, welcome to the Bifederal podcast.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to be here. This is a big day, a lot of stuff happening. I last night I tweeted out a post because I was shocked to see that Trump had come out on social media and said that he had just fired Lisa Cook, one of the Fed committee members or governor. And, the thing is, she's saying right now that she's not fired. So this is going to be an interesting story as it unfolds. This is the first time in the history of the presidency that we've seen this happen, 111 years. And the president does have the ability to fire a Fed official for cause or just cause. But in this case, there's no charges filed. Obviously, she's accused of holding two mortgages. Basically, one of them obviously must be in violation of the clause, meaning she listed both of them, I believe, as a primary resident. At least that's the allegations.
Oh, okay.
And so it's going to be an interesting thing to see because, there's no charges from the Department of Justice. He's just basically steamrolling over the Fed, along with the administration officials that have been pushing back over the last month, 2 months, maybe even longer, really, demanding for interest rates to be lowered, which, this is just kind of the latest controversy with the Fed. I mentioned before we had a chance to start back in 2020, several Fed officials were accused of insider trading and using knowledge of in their position for trading itself. And none of them no charges were ever brought. They resigned, several of them. Kaplan was probably the biggest one, I think, out of maybe Fed Bank in Dallas. And then Bostic in Atlanta, he refused to resign. And then nothing happened. I mean, it's a typical, we say independence of the Fed, but basically the Fed is almost like a rogue. It's its own entity here, and not always, in my mind, aligned with the best interests of the country.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because I never really understood that the president had the authority to fire anybody on an independent Fed. We all know it's maybe not as independent as they like to call themselves, but I guess it just makes me think of the bigger story here, which is, Trump seems to be hell-bent on picking a fight at the Fed and point out their shortcomings. And he seems to have his team on it as well it's a really weird conundrum because you have Bessent saying, hey, I'm friends with Jerome. We have lunch every week or breakfast every week. But at the same time, then Bessent's calling the Fed a bunch of UBI academics. Then, of course, they go after the remodel and how much money is being spent there, calling it wasteful. And we've even heard Bessent say things, along the lines, don't quote me, but along the lines of like, have they ever been successful in meeting their mandates? So I'm wondering, like, bigger picture here, why is Trump, it just doesn't seem like lowering rates is enough of a reason. Like, is there something more than bullying the Fed just to lower rates?
Yeah, there is. This is part of a really, really big macro overview. And I mean, this is we are going to go through an incredibly turbulent, chaotic time over the next year to 2 years. And it has to do with everything from chips, energy, AI, the lack of Treasury, the inability to move out onto the long curve of the Treasuries. All of these things are coming together. If you were to really zoom out and not talk about just those issues, but to try and find out why there is so much pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates, it's probably directly tied to our interest expense, which is skyrocketing. And I will say, quite frankly, I do not believe that if they lower interest rates, which they're going to, I mean, this is inevitable. I actually do think they're overdue, and I think Trump's on the right side of this argument. And that it has nothing to do with Trump. I mean, I don't give a shit about that clown or Biden. I am not a red or blue team member. These people are just jerks. I mean, they have, they do not have your interest, Paul, or mine in the back of their mind. We're nothing to these people. We're nothing. But what I'm going to try to say is that he's got a good case for this, and part of it has to do with the fact that interest rates are off the charts. But continuing what I was going to say, I think that even if they lower interest rates, they cannot affect the long end of the yield curve, where they need to move out these treasuries to the long end. Right now, Bissett is wrapped up into the short end of the yield curve, and it's not helping us. So that's the number one thing. I think they're very concerned about this interest expense, which it's going to go over $1 trillion.
No, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was actually just listening to Michael Howell talk about this topic, and that as they push more buying into bills, and if they can do that in conjunction with the Fed lowering rates, then they'll have enough liquidity that they'll kind of starve. I mean, by not issuing any term debt and letting that fall off the balance sheet, they'll sort of starve the market of notes and bonds, which will then cause what little buying pressure remains there to suppress interest rates on the long end. That was sort of the theory. I don't know. I'm not a bond technician, so I don't know exactly.
It's a valid theory. Right, I mean, I understand what he's saying, and it makes sense. Let's face it. I mean, all of this is basically, if I'm correct or he's correct, it doesn't matter. If they're not able to lower that long end of the yield curve on those interest rates and be able to finance treasuries out on that end, then guess what? We are going to end up either with yield curve control, some form of monetizing that long end of the debt in order to get that out there. And but the second thing I was going to say, part of this interest rate policy is because obviously the Trump administration has pivoted, from that time when Elon, think of Elon, and we're going to cut the government. We're going to start with $2 trillion, which, by the way, we're going to go $2 trillion over our income this year as a country. $2 trillion in deficit in 1 year. So from 2 trillion to 1 trillion before he even gets in office. And then I'm just going to be generous and say that Elon managed to get through Doge 180, maybe $180 billion of cuts. Nothing happened. So what have they done since then? They've made it very clear they're pivoting. And that pivot is to looking to a farther out future that involves, again, AI primarily, along with the fact that they've had a come to Jesus moment when it comes to our inability to produce the necessary manufacturing ingredients to arm ourselves and rearm ourselves as a nation. I mean, basically, and I know this might piss some people off, but Russia kicked our ass as far as being able to manufacture munitions. And quite frankly, you just saw today in the news, Trump is telling China, you will give us these rare earth magnets. We need them. And we do. You are not going to build any kind of a defense network, either ABM or any of the rocket shields or anything else that has to do with the defense industry, if you don't have those magnets and you don't have the rare earths. And we don't. China controls 90% of those. So, if you look out, zoom out, I think there's a plan here. Whether they're going to execute it successfully, right. I'm not sure.
So let's talk about the plan there and your vision of it. It seems to me like we can all agree as Bitcoiners that there's a large print coming, but I think a lot of us have presumed that that large print is coming on the back of a recession of some significant size. But I can also make a case that that large print could come before a recession in an effort to build out the electric infrastructure that's needed for AI, to reshore manufacturing, to suppress the dollar, which would help with the manufacturing. Do you see, like so many sort of traditional Wall Street analysts do right now, a recession on the horizon? Or do you think this will like we cannot afford, like Luke Groman says sometimes, like we cannot afford a recession, so there will be no recession, and we will just keep printing and keep driving this forward. What are your thoughts? If I'm making any sense at all there?
No, you are. That's, in fact, I'm going to tell you something that's really insightful, and it's a great segue into this next part of the discussion, which is and hat tip to Luke. He just had a podcast the other day that was just off the charts as far as being able to crystallize the thoughts that have been in my mind, which is, yes, I don't think that we're headed for a recession. I do think that the big print is coming, and there is a hat tip to Larry Lepard. Great book, by the way. So I don't think that we're going to see that. And the reason is because what they really want to do on these interest rates and the yield curve, what they really want to do is they want to inject liquidity into this system. We need it because, again, you already pointed out, chips, power, manufacturing, that's what they want. That's what they need. Why did the country just invest in a private company, Intel? I mean, that's incredible. I mean, we just bought part of that. And did you vote for that? I didn't vote to.
No, I know exactly right. I didn't vote for the United States to become like China and have state-owned entities.
And, talking about power, China can build out a nuclear reactor 8 to 9 times cheaper than we can. Okay, we've got a problem here, and that problem, I wanted to talk about this. Maybe this is a good way instead of so I'll just answer your question. No, I don't see a recession in our future. And the reason is because I believe they are going to inject incredible amounts of liquidity in this thing to keep this thing going right now. They are willing to make a bet. They are willing to let inflation run hot. We've already seen that. The Fed has capitulated. They are moving the goalposts. It's no longer just 2%. We don't know where it's going to end up. But in conjunction with that whole plan, we're going to see higher inflation in my mind. It's going to be secular. Some industries are going to be rocketed with inflation. But if you zoom out, if you really get out on planet Mars and look down on Earth here and you say, okay, what is the problem here? What's the problem? The problem really goes back to 1944, and it is the Bretton Woods Agreement. That is what is causing this.
Explain that.
Well, think about it for a minute. At the end of World War II, because of the fear of Nazi seizure of gold, much of gold was moved to America. Mm-hmm. Much of it was in London. As the war ended, repatriations took place. Countries began to siphon gold, or we siphoned gold off the world market because they needed dollars. They needed equipment. We were not a deficit nation. We were exporting we were the world's exporter of equipment, manufacturing capability after World War II. We had 20,000 tons of gold in our vaults here. And today we have 8,000. At the end of 1944, when the Bretton Woods Agreement came into effect, we discovered over a period of 2 decades what it meant, the Triffin's dilemma meant. And what that is that basically we have become an exporter nation of dollars. We have based the world currency on dollars. And those dollars have resulted over that period of time. The Bretton Woods Agreement wasn't even really finalized. The last nation was not in until like late 1950s. So the problem was, and it was pointed out at Bretton Woods, by becoming the world's reserve currency, we were going to export dollars, have a stronger than natural exchange rate dollar, and we were going to export our manufacturing, and we did. 2001 with China entering the WTO was the final nail in the coffin. Yep. So from the end of the period when they implemented to 1971, it was like 12 years. It only took 12 years for us to take all that gold that we had and just basically have it siphoned off because countries began to realize, we were printing dollars at such an exorbitant rate that we could never redeem them for gold. By the time we got down to 8,000 tons, maybe, then they said, you know what? Nixon came on. He said, we are going to close the repatriation window. He severed all ties to gold. Basically, we've been on fiat currency ever since. And I'd say if you look at 1971, Paul, I think that's really the turning moment for America, personally.
Yep. Year I was born.
I've got T-shirts from that that old buddy.
Awesome.
I was
That's
there.
awesome.
I remember Nixon on TV. I mean, I was a kid. Well, I wasn't young. I mean, I was a teenager. I was driving and everything, and he comes on there. At the time, I didn't think anything about it. But you know something? Within a few years, my life sucked. My parents' life sucked.
We were talking about, this agenda with the Fed and recession or not recession. I wanted to play devil's advocate real quick because historically speaking, in hindsight, we can look at all the way back to the War for Independence, that most of the wars are caused by, or most of the big recessions, which then lead to wars, seem to be caused by central banks withdrawing liquidity. And so I agree with you on one side, right? That it makes, and Luke, like, it makes no sense. There's no way we can have a recession. And so liquidity, it's either liquidity or die. On the other side, when I look at history, I say, like, this is the ultimate time for the Fed or central banks globally to withdraw liquidity and cause a crash. And this is what concerns me about this fight that Trump is picking with the Federal Reserve, because you're going up against some sort of powers that have been in existence for a long, long time that seem to be behind every single war we've had and every major recession we've had. So how do you square that circle of history, that cycle of history? Like, are we really going to break out of that this time? Or do you think we could have the rug pulled out from under us, which is sort of like kind of what we see illustrated by like the Great Takening and other forecasts that are doom and gloom that say that there's something major on the horizon?
Well, I think the last point that you brought up is important because in my mind, we are in what I consider to be like the fourth turning. And if you follow Neil Howe, I'm reading his book again. And if you follow that, we're in that crisis mode right now. And it should peak. In fact, it should be within the next 3 to 5 years. We should be through this. And I think that we are at a point now as a nation. Again, I hate to use the word zoom out, but again, if you just step back for a minute and think about what Luke said and what I'm discussing today too. We are at a point now with $37 trillion in debt, a $2 trillion deficit every year. Remember Biden last year, $2 trillion. What's it going to be under Trump? $2 trillion. We've got fabulous five that will not be cut: Medicare, Medicaid, defense, interest, and you might be able to. You could have some wiggle room, in some of these, but Social Security and stuff. These five are untouchable. So we are going to be running this deficit. We're having trouble financing that deficit. And I think we're at a point now where you will either default, kind of like what you're saying, almost like a deflationary recession. That would be brutal. Or default on our debt, or print our way out of our debt, or there's a third option. And I think, truthfully, that the Trump administration is betting on this. They're willing to go through this short period of painful inflation, secular and state, and to get to the other side. And that other side that they're looking for is to get a growth out of a GDP growth out of this dilemma. And that's a really difficult needle to thread. But I do think that is their plan. And what would that also entail? What has Bessent? What are some of these people have already? What is Steve Moran? Who? What is his new position going to be? He's going to be a Fed, maybe. He's in position right now. He's one of the candidates to fill the chairman of the Fed, and we'll see. But he has given great direction through the Economic Council to the president, and he has talked about a Bretton Woods 2, a reset, and so has Bessent. The Mar-a-Lago 2 Accord, whatever you want to call it. The thing that I'm trying to say is I think we're getting to the end stage, the end game here, and that what you're discussing means that they've made a decision in my mind that they're not going to, just like Luke said, they are not going to allow a recession. Here's another thing. If you have the stock market crash right now, we are toast. I mean, we count on those receipts. And without the stock market going where it is right now, I mean, we'd be in a lot worse fiscal position than we are. So that's just how I feel like it's going, and we'll see. I mean, I don't know.
Well, that sort of aligns with the crack up boom idea.
Yes.
right? And I think there's a lot of validity there, and it would be sort of fitting because it's something that nobody alive today has ever experienced. So it has historical precedence, but it doesn't have a modern precedence, and so people would especially in the United States would be like, what the hell's happening? And I think Luke kind of describes this as like Argentina with U.S. Traits
Well,
or something like that.
that's a good point. I mean, because let's face it, I mean, the US dollar, if the real issue when you think about what I was discussing earlier about gold and a neutral reserve asset, you have to realize that there's such a difference between a neutral reserve asset on a balance sheet and currency. And, the United States the mistake was attempting to peg gold to the dollar. And so what happened as, this Triffin's dilemma played out, we saw more and more dollars float out of the country, and we were forced to back those up with the underlying asset. And if you back your currency by a fixed commodity or a scarce commodity like that, how do you settle that in net trade settlements? It's a window that I don't think you can negotiate. I think the basic problem here is that the U.S. is the world's reserve currency. And maybe I don't think that's going away for a long time. But the idea of backing it by something, I'm not sure that can be done. So will these be freely floating currencies that float in international trade freely in order to determine a base rate? I don't know. But I don't see how going forward. For instance, let me ask you this. What if the U.S. basically had a global reset and they said, you know what, we're betting on Bitcoin. We're going to screw the world. All these central banks that have been collecting gold over the last 5 to 6 years and in hyper accumulation since the invasion of Ukraine and the seizure of Russians' FX reserves. What if the U.S. says, hey, we're going to go on a Bitcoin standard. We're going to screw you because you don't have Bitcoin and we do. Well, do they have Bitcoin? But let's just say that they accumulate, let's say they take over MicroStrategy or Strategy now, and they accumulate the world's greatest position in Bitcoin. If you kept the system the way it is right now, you would lose all your Bitcoin over a period of 10 to 20 years. It'd all be gone because nothing would change with that dilemma.
We could go on for hours on all these theories, and I'm sure you and I and everybody else has done this in private conversations about like what's really going on behind the scenes, and are Satoshi coins, U.S. coins, or who knows, right? But I want to go back and talk to you about the '70s because you lived through it, and it sort of feels, it's not a match, but it certainly rhymes with especially this vision of going through a very serious, short, abrupt bout of inflation to reset the debt to GDP ratio in the United States. And if we're going to go through like something like that in Trump's term, it's going to have to ramp up and be violent and fast so that he can get to the other side before the next election. So what was that like? What was it like being an investor, an employee, just being alive at that time, living through a serious bout of inflation?
Yeah, it sucked. I mean, it sucked. My life was, I was a young kid. I was working, flipping burgers, I think. And it just sucked because, my parents, the same thing. Everything started to escalate and go up. But, at first it's like it's the frog in the pot of water. You don't see it. But all of a sudden you just get this feeling like, what am I going to do with my paycheck when I get it? Where am I going to spend it? When inflation got up to like about 14%, I think. A 30-year mortgage at one time got up to 17, 18%. I remember a car loan at that time at 20 to 21%. So the whole world just started. And here's the real part of the issue was the fact that you remember within 4 years, they had the petrodollar system established. They had all the OPEC nations on board. It was a done deal. What did they have to do? They had to inflate the petro system so that it could accommodate treasuries. And what did that do? I went from gas at 20 cents a gallon or 25 cents a gallon to $2 a gallon. So imagine if it's $3 a gallon right now and it's $15 next year. $15.
Mm,
And here's the thing. And before I leave that subject, I will say another thing too. It affected people's mentality. I
sure.
mean, you've got people that would get a paycheck, and what they do, they go out there and buy shit. You just buy shit. Sometimes you didn't even need it. I mean, there are probably people with extra refrigerators down in their basement, and
Yep.
it's stupid stuff like that. Once the money really breaks and people don't have faith in it, things change rapidly. Now, what happened? Finally, you got Volcker to come in there, and he was able to crush that through incredibly punishing interest rate
Right.
raises. But the thing is, you can't do that now.
Right.
The debt ratio, I think it was 36% now, and you cannot do that in this environment. So what
Which
I
is
just
always leads me to, because I do the exact same analysis, and it leads me to, we have to have a radically appreciating asset on the balance sheet of the government, or else it just will not work.
again, I honestly believe they are making a bet on those three. Those really, it's almost four industries. They're trying to get the idea of the chips, manufacturing back here, this idea of rare earths, which are critical, and energy, this infrastructure,
Hmm.
if you will, in the U.S.
Do you think if they're successful in engineering an AI boom, providing the energy and making sure that all the leading AI companies are here in the United States, if they're successful in that, do you think that will engineer enough deflation that we wouldn't feel this inflationary pulse as a consumer as radically?
Absolutely. I think this could be successful in 3 to 5 years. So what happens in the meantime?
Mm,
We are going to get to experience some really unpleasant, unhappy times.
mm,
And, what is it? What's the safety release here? How do you get out of this thing?
mm.
What do? You do the same thing my parents did back in the 70s. They bought gold. I mean, I remember them bringing home coins, and stick them in the damn basement in rafters and stuff, and bury them out in the yard, or everybody was starting to look at gold as a way to preserve your wealth. I honestly believe that Bitcoin is the fastest horse in this race,
Mm-hmm.
that nothing's going to capture Bitcoin's rise over the next few years. And I think that if you're well positioned and you understand this market, you should be in anything that the government can't print. But I would strongly encourage people to be in Bitcoin as much as you can comfortably hold, and gold also. I mean, I honestly think that gold is a play to diversify your risk if you want to. I personally don't hold gold. I think that Bitcoin is the better store of value. And that's what I'm discussing here going forwards, a way to preserve my purchasing power. That's what I'm trying to do here.
Mm-hmm.
And you could make an argument for, some of the other world's assets, from art to collectible cars to beachfront property. But those are all a pain in the ass. I mean, they're
Mm-hmm.
all a pain in the ass. Gold's a pain in the ass. And it's a really pain in the ass if you stick a bar up your ass to cross the border. So, Bitcoin cannot be beaten. It is the apex asset in this battle. And if it's going to be a tumultuous 3 to 5 years, what do you want? You want things they cannot print. Bitcoin's the answer for me.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a great lead into the next sort of topic I want to talk to you, which is this sort of your foundational passion for Bitcoin. And you said, I'm not sure where you said it, but you said that you're a Bitcoiner and you've won the war, something to that
Yeah.
level. Can you talk to us about the moment that you knew Bitcoin wasn't just an investment, but it was more of a mission for humanity? Like what was it about Bitcoin that put you on that track?
When you think about understanding Bitcoin and how difficult it is, and you think about how people go down the rabbit hole in the journey, I don't think there are many people that have an aha moment where they just get it. I have met one person who was a technologist, and like in 13 to 15, I remember listening to him, and he got it. He just he looked at it, he understood what this meant. It was something that he had already been thinking, we got to find a way to get that. And so he just went all in, he understood it. That wasn't me. It took me work. You've got to work to get Bitcoin. It's not going to be given to you. And once you do understand it, it's going to be work to keep it. It's very difficult to put your fist around Bitcoin and hold on to the damn thing. Now, it's easier in this cycle, although today Bitcoin's 109,000. It's the 26th of August, and I got a bunch of leaky lettuce hand simpletons on my X feed that are out there whining and bitching and stuff. They got their panties in a wad, and this is a small dip. It's like 20-25%. That's silly. You want to see volatility, wait for Bitcoin to drop down 50, 60, 80%, and then you're going to have a ride. So
Agreed.
you don't, the thing is, what I'm trying to say is there's no moment, but I do believe when I say that you have won the war, what I'm saying is if you understand Bitcoin and you hold Bitcoin, you have won. And not only that, like I said, keeping it yourself in cold storage, you're free. You have no counterparty risk. Your risk is so limited, I should say, compared to any other asset on the planet. So if you get it, you put it in cold storage, you hold on to it in your fist, and then you study it so that you never have a doubt. And you never think about trading, margin, leverage. You just hold Bitcoin. You will create generational wealth. You will live, because I'm just assuming people like yourself that are a lot younger. Like I said, I've got T-shirts as old as you. Well, you know what? For anybody younger like yourself, it's going to be a glorious orange future in front of you, and you're safe. You got it made.
Well, first, you're always welcome back, because anybody who calls me young, I love it. Secondly, I agree with you on so many points there. This cycle, as wonderful as it has been to eclipse 100,000, has been a bit frustrating for me because, and I'm not sure exactly when you got into Bitcoin, but when I got into Bitcoin in 2017, it was all people that were there to fight the system, that wanted, this was the way we were going to pull the rug out from under central banks. We were going to pull the rug out from under never ending wars. And there was that mission. And so much of what I see today, you said lettuce hands, right? It's like people that are just, they're not taking the time to understand the mission. They're not taking time to understand the philosophy of Bitcoin, and they're just buying it because, the government said this is good now, and I can make some money. So I'm concerned about, this is the only thing that pushes back on the idea that the 4-year cycle's over, that we're just going to be accumulating now forever, because I feel like there's a lot of weak hands out there that aren't on the mission. And I think being on the mission is what could change humanity. So I'm wondering how you feel about that, and how that relates to this idea of, Bitcoin fixes this.
Yeah, that's a really insightful lead in. I mean, that's a really important topic. I'm glad you brought that up, because I agree with you. I'm on board in the same direction that you are on this. I have real concerns going forward. And, Bitcoin will die if people do not support it. Bitcoin at the time when Satoshi wrote the original protocol, I can't remember how many lines of code or how big it was. It wasn't that very big. And there have been multiple changes and upgrades throughout the period of time. People have nurtured Bitcoin. And without people involved in self-custody and holding Bitcoin in order to prevent derivative products on top of Bitcoin and the possibility of everything from paper Bitcoin to incredible unravelings of leverage in the future, and there are so many there's so many parts of that question, because you could zoom out and you could say, well, just look at the ETFs. Look at these Bitcoin Treasury companies. They are, in my mind, a threat to Bitcoin if people do not understand how important it is to both run a node and to hold Bitcoin in self-custody. It's critical. Why is it so important to run a node? Because it maintains the health of the network. It strengthens the network. It creates the opportunity for you to be a sovereign individual. Every human being that interacts with the blockchain must do so through a node. When Satoshi was there, the node, the mining, it was all occurring on a computer, okay, all in one unit. He never understood where this was going as far as mining pools, the centralization, this current controversy over those the Bitcoin core developers and knots. I run knots. I am a knots supporter. I do not believe that spam should be on the network. It's a money protocol. It's not for data transmission. It's not to put your fucking JPEGs of rocks, pigs, dicks, whatever the hell it is you're sticking on our chain. That doesn't belong here. And it used to be at one time that core was aligned with that idea of preventing that. Since 2023 is when it changed. And I can point to the bad actors in the space in my mind that enabled that. And I can also say that it has been not in Bitcoin's benefit. So in my mind, if you've made money in this cycle, Bitcoin's what, 110,000, 109,000? People that got in before, if you were in the last cycle or the cycle before, give back, run a fucking node and figure out yourself if you're going to write knots or core. Bitcoin's a protocol.
Yeah.
When I say core or knots, I'm talking about the software implementation to run the protocol. That's what I'm discussing. And it's very important. So I agree with you. I think there are risks out there, and we have to win this war, and you have to fight. Humans have been fighting for as long as there's written history.
Well, you're obviously a fighter, right? I mean, you've been a pilot in the Air Force.
Yeah. No, I was
worked
Navy.
Navy. Sorry,
I'm sorry, but I just got to correct you because
no, I'm sure I understand that's
an Air Force pilot. An Air Force pilot can land anywhere. Okay,
right.
But a Navy pilot, when you take off from the carrier, you have to come back. You must come back or go in the water. So
that's right.
Yeah, there is a difference.
There's a difference.
Navy pilot.
And you've worked underground in mines. You've worked in oil fields. I know a little bit about that, and that is no easy job.
No.
So you're naturally a fighter, from what I can tell. But you're also obviously an artist. So that's a really unique combination between somebody with the willpower to be a person who will fight and the discipline, but at the same time be creative. So with that much of a diverse background and life experience, has that had an influence on your Bitcoin philosophy? Or has it helped you relate to Bitcoin or your vision of how Bitcoin could change humanity?
I like that last part of what you said, the vision of how you could change, because I do have that. I've tried to do a series of things called the Bitcoin Life because I want people to be able to picture what I'm talking about when I say Bitcoin gives you freedom. And when I say we've won the war, that's what I'm discussing. The idea of what comes afterwards. Mm-hmm. I believe Bitcoin will be successful. I believe we will win this war, and I do think that you are going to see an unbelievable future for us Bitcoiners going forward. It's going to be incredible. And you're going to have wealth transferred to people that are some of the most ethically and morally aligned people on this planet. And they are builders. They're going to build things. They're going to do stuff. And I see a world where you're going to have time stretch out. I don't like that low time preference. How I try and picture it is this. For me, my time has stretched out. I don't give a shit about so many of the things that people are concerned about. They don't even affect me. Like Lisa Cook, if Trump's going to fire, I don't give a shit. I don't care if he fires all of them tonight. It means nothing to me. I don't care if they print. I don't give a shit. They could print as much money as they want. And guess what? Just makes my purchasing power go up and up and up. I can prove that. You can look at it, any chart. You can put Bitcoin against gold. It kills it. Bitcoin against treasuries, slays it. Bitcoin against cash. There's no sense doing it. Bitcoin against eggs. I mean, There's no place where Bitcoin doesn't just crush everything. So what is your future going to be, Paul? Like I see you've got some fishing rods and stuff back there. Well, guess what? I want people to understand that it has nothing to do with being like a conventional artist, or they see the paintings behind me and stuff. Look around my studio right now. It's not that. It's the idea that you're going to be able to do the things you want to do with the people you want to be with and have the time to do it. You're going to step off the damn hamster wheel, get on board with a new life. And that's what's coming for Bitcoiners. And the no coiners, you know what? They're just going to shed a lot of crocodile tears. And you know what? At this point, there's enough information out there. If you're still sitting on the sidelines and you're unwilling to investigate in Bitcoin, you know what? Goodbye.
Yeah.
I'll just, have fun staying poor, and I'll try to help you if I can as the world evolves.
There's so many things there that resonated with me. I mean, that is like my driving passion in Bitcoin is to, I think that's why we call it fuck you money, right? The fuck you money means fuck you. Yeah. I'm doing whatever the hell I want to do. Because I don't need anybody else's resources. I don't need anybody else's help. I'm completely sovereign. And
I want to interrupt you for a minute,
yeah,
because you know what? I love what you just brought up there. And you and I are even more special. We even have the ability to go really fuck you, because you know what? A lot of these people can't. And I'm
yep,
talking about influencers. I'm talking about people like in Treasury companies. You know, even Saylor, billionaire, he doesn't have that ability. He can't just stand up there and say,
that's a good
fuck
point.
you.
Good point.
I am a sovereign individual. I do what I want,
Right.
and you don't affect me.
Well,
He
this
doesn't
this
have
kind
that
of
either.
resonates with what I've heard you say about having enough.
Yeah,
That's
that's
kind of
a
it, right? That's it.
yeah. How many people, that's a really I'm very fortunate, because at some point, it happened about maybe 3 years ago. I got to a place where I looked and I thought, I don't need any more Bitcoin. I don't have to do this. I don't have to let other people, I don't need this. That's another thing. Sailor will never have that freedom.
Right.
He'll never be able to just get up in the morning and just look around and think, I have enough in life. And there are many people that are like that. And I love Sailor. I mean, he's done a great
Yeah,
job. I'm
sure.
not
Absolutely.
bad mouthing him, but the greatest story, of course, comes from it's a long time ago. It's kind of complicated. It involves some writers, but basically one of the writers was looking at his friend, and he just looked at this hedge fund manager. Guy was a billionaire. They were on his beautiful, I don't think that was a yacht. They were actually having a party, but it was all the Illuminati, everyone that was somebody was invited there. And they had these authors because they were both famous. And the one guy looks at him and says, and pointing to the hedge fund manager, he says, doesn't it bother you that that guy's going to earn more today or this week than you're going to earn in your whole lifetime on your royalties on that book? And it was a bestseller. It was Catch 22. And he looked at him. He said, I have something he will never have. I have enough.
It is a very freeing feeling to get there.
It should be.
And it was only Bitcoin that allowed me to even see the possibility of that future. And this is what this is one of the reasons why I think Bitcoin changes humanity, because I do believe in a human's potential to manifest. And I think Bitcoin is like a training wheel for manifestation, because once you understand Bitcoin and once you understand the design, you can start to envision a realistic future where you achieve that freedom. You achieve that abundance where you can say, I will have enough, and I'll have enough for me and my family and my kids, and this thing will just keep supporting everybody. And so once you can clearly see that in your head, then you can start to manifest all these great things that before were like, just like, yeah, maybe someday. It's like, no. Now I see, if I just keep repeating this and doing the simple thing of stacking and hodling, that it will get there. And that will
Yeah.
change my life and my family's trajectory for centuries. Like that's
Yeah.
what I think, like how Bitcoin changes it one by one, person by person. And obviously some people that have had certain life experiences, I think they grok it much faster than others. Maybe there are future catastrophes coming that will flip the switch for other people. And every time, and I think people need to understand, every time that situation happens, when those financial moments, those crises happen, and people dump Bitcoin, you're only going to push Bitcoin deeper into the hands of people that will never sell. And there's only 21 million coins. On this planet, there's at least 21 million people that will never sell their freaking Bitcoin. At least. And they will all drive to those hands eventually. So on the long horizon, this stuff has nothing it can do except go up in price, right? And
Well, you
it's
just
like,
painted a great picture. I need to go out and get some more Bitcoin.
good.
you
I'll
know,
go with you.
I I like one of the things you said there, because it's very difficult for people to understand that you've got to hold two opposing ideas. And Bitcoiners can do this. I mean, you can do this, guys. You just have to, you and gals, you've got to be able to understand when we talk about the concept of hodling and not selling your Bitcoin, collecting as much Bitcoin as you can. We're talking, in my mind, about that stage of your life where you are accumulating wealth. But at some point in your life, I hope that you are can find yourself in a position where you understand that you can step off that hamster wheel and enjoy your life, because life is short. I mean, I can see my final block out there on the horizon coming at me. And I realize life is short and I'm not wasting any more time. And that's another thing that you and I and other people will have, is we have the privilege to be able to tell the world, you know what? I don't have to participate in whatever games it is you're playing here.
You brought it up, so I want to bring it up. You talk about your last blockchain, your last breath. And so I'm wondering, with all this effort, right? You have enough. We know Bitcoin is going to generate wealth for ourselves and our families going forward. But if you were to be brought up in a conversation amongst Bitcoiners 50 years from now, what is the legacy or what is the message you would want connected to your name and your story?
The idea that he had a vision for a world without war, a world where people had real wealth, lived outside of a system that was corrupt and debasing their very store of value, and that was the Bitcoin life. And he painted it for people, both in the work that you see here and in a vision, an idea. That would be what I want people to remember me by, because at the end of the road, when you take that last breath, nothing that you see around me right now, I'm not taking any of it with me. You take nothing. Not a single sack goes with you across the river Styx. It's just you and the boatman. And you want to be thinking to yourself, what is it I leave behind? And I hope, I'm trying to do a really good job here, living each day with honor, strength, integrity, and kindness. And if you do that, and I'm not successful all the time, especially kindness, but if you do it, you are going to leave a legacy. What you do here does echo in eternity. You will leave a legacy where people remember you. You will change lives. Sometimes it's something you don't say. Mostly it's something you do to help someone else. And that changes their path. Every single door changes just by the smallest actions that you make. You change people's lives. So it's something that you should think about, I think, as a Bitcoiner.
I love that, and I think that's so important. And I agree that there is something well beyond this life that we can impact. You, in one tweet, you said recently that Bitcoin's generational wealth, and that many families will close out their bloodlines if they miss it. I wonder if you could expand on exactly what you meant by that, closing out a bloodline.
Well, it's this idea. Bitcoin is not going to stop going up and to the right. I mean, it does go up forever, Laura. I mean, it does. It does. It just mathematically, if you look at the world's value and you look at the buckets out there, the tranches, everything from fixed income to real estate to art, currency, all of these, they are misallocated. The energy of our system is in the wrong buckets. It doesn't belong there. You've got jackasses like, wealthy people that are owning 10 homes. You've got people that are doing everything they can to try and store wealth. It's all misallocated. It is going to take forever for that capital to be reallocated to Bitcoin. We are going to have decades where Bitcoin is just going to continue to consume the planet like a virus. And so what I'm talking about is people don't understand, especially, again, kids out there that are a lot younger than me, they just don't get the fact that they are creating wealth that is just going to compound. It's been 55% for the last 5 years, 80% for the last 8 to 10. Where's it going to go in the future? I don't see how you can make a case that Bitcoin's CAGR going over the next 10 years is going to be less than 35%. And is it going to get down to 20% in 20 years, 21 years? I don't know. I'm not sure about that. If you just start looking at the numbers and you start figuring out the amount of wealth that can siphon into Bitcoin and where it's going, you are going to create generational wealth with very small amounts of Bitcoin. And what are you going to do? You hopefully will come to an understanding that many wealthy families have, which is you never sell the underlying asset. You mentioned earlier in the podcast, you said you're trying to find an asset that beats the annual rate of debasement, whatever that is. It's compounding at a rate so high that you never want to get rid of it. And that's how you live that life. It's that buy, borrow, die dynasty idea. The fact that at some point you will be holding a capital asset that the entire planet wants. There's only 21 million, and there's not that. I mean, I think there's probably let's just say 3 million that are lost. 1.1 of Satoshis are gone. They've sucked up 1.3 million coins in these ETFs, maybe 1.4 now. Sailor, 630 some coins. All these treasury companies, and they're doubling every few months. They've sucked up like 1 million coins. So where's this going? At some point, you're going to see real price discovery and supply dynamics that are going to water your eyes. So yeah, I think a very small amount of Bitcoin, even a tenth of a Bitcoin going forward for a young person, is going to be generational wealth. And it should make everybody very hopeful and excited about the future.
I just kind of want to add to that. I think it's super important that people hodling Bitcoin, especially for their kids and future generations, take the time and energy to pass along the philosophy, right? And the education. I worked in traditional finance and a trust company for a lot of years. And it was amazing how much wealth some pair of parents might acquire, and then the kids just couldn't manage it, right? And would lose it. So it's when I start thinking about like generational wealth and ending a bloodline, it's like you could end generational poverty for a bloodline if you pass along not only the Bitcoin but the culture and the education, the understanding of why this is so important. And so I love the fact that you focus on that. Other Bitcoiners focus on that. And I hope we can maintain that for my lifetime and others. But when you said close out their bloodlines if they miss it, that's where I was confused as to what you meant exactly.
I must have been discussing the idea that for instance, in my family, I mentioned earlier that there's enough information out there that everybody should be able to understand or grok Bitcoin. But the bottom line is most people are not going to. Yeah. We are going to be by ourselves here. We are pretty much alone. There are people coming into the space, retail and new from short-term holders. There'll be new Bitcoiners made out of that. But the actual amount of Bitcoiners across the planet, I think, is incredibly small. Those numbers that have been floated out there at 300, 400 million people, I don't believe that at all. Mm-hmm. I think Rivers data that came out recently was much more accurate, and it had a very small number of people that are actually holding Bitcoin. So what I'm talking about in my life is this. I'm stacking now for other people. If I'm accumulating Bitcoin now, I'm stacking for the people I love, the people that are close to me, the people that are never going to get it. And many times it's not because they're stupid. Many times they're just so damn busy. They don't have time to poke their head out, and just look around. I mean, some of our kids, everybody's working under a household. Everybody's trying to keep ahead. Everything's going up. Insurance, car insurance, house insurance, medical care, the daycare is off the charts. So they're just maxed out. So I just figure I got to take it on my shoulders to stack for other people. So even if these people miss out, I'm still stacking for them. And if you're a good Bitcoiner and you're a good moral person, you should be thinking about that for your people you love. Mm-hmm. Even if they're jackasses, even if it's that uncle at the dinner table that calls you a moron, you ought to think about him and realize, he's never going to get it, either because of his age or his training, especially if he's like you from the TradFi world. He probably will never get it. But I'm
Some
just
of us
saying,
got it.
I probably just meant that. I will say one thing in response to something you brought up. Do you know that if you look at history, most generational wealth is not generational, and it's lost within the third generation. It's the third one that loses usually everything. And guess what else? Let's just say that you've got a great beer mug collection, or you've got fishing rods that are like priceless, and you've collected them By the third generation, they usually end up in the garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because it loses the tie, the connection. So you should think in your own mind, well, what does that mean that I can leave people? Well, you can leave them Bitcoin and a legacy, because let's face it, if you leave somebody Bitcoin and in 20 to 30 years it goes where I'm saying it's going to go, you are going to be leaving them something that they're not going to throw out in the garbage. They're going to have to learn how to manage it and also how to use it.
Yeah,
And so,
that's really interesting. So I had an experience when I was working at TradFi. This family had created a trust, and most trusts are fairly straightforward. Like, you know, you hit this age, you get this money. This age, this money. Blah 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 blah. This individual who had also worked in TradFi his whole life created an entire philosophy around the trust, why he set it up, and what the philosophical goals were, and what you needed to do as an individual, both philosophically, culturally, and materially, and merit wise, to be able to qualify for receiving this benefit. And it had to align with this philosophy. And it was freaking brilliant. And it was a document that would move on across multiple generations in perpetuity. So your kids, everybody would be aligned with this grantor's philosophy if they wanted to enjoy the benefits of this. And it wasn't just like get off drugs, you know, get a job. It was really well crafted. And I think that's so much about like what is missing today in culture is this. I like to call it old school Italian family planning, where the
I like,
matriarch just, you know, all the family lives together. The matriarch is
I
there,
like, I like.
and every night they argue about everything, but they get to a common understanding and mission, and the family is working towards that mission. Um, and I think that's so important. And I think the breakdown of the family unit has we've lost a lot of that. But I hope that I guess one of my hopes is that Bitcoin has such a long time frame ahead of it, has such a allows you to stretch out time and look so far into the future that people will begin to realize again the importance of delivering the culture with it.
Well, I think that's one of the gifts that Bitcoin can give mankind, is because, yes, the family unit seems it's disintegrated. We have an attention span of a gnat now.
Mm-hmm.
And I just saw the other day, reading by adults in the U.S. is going down 3% a year every year. And people aren't reading to their kids anymore in the evenings. You know, it's like less than 5%. So why is that? I mean, when you think of it, I just tie everything to our broken money. I really do think it's the fiat system that we're living on that is destroying both our planet, our communities, you know, the deaths of despair. It's causing everyone to work so hard that they cannot just sit back and relax. There's no deep breaths now. And so, you know, I would like to think that Bitcoin can give us back that freedom, and the family unit could perhaps somehow morph itself back into a happier time. You know, I was very fortunate as a young man. I mean, my dad could support us, you know, with just one job, and my mom worked occasionally and stuff. But you know, when she wanted to, she did what she wanted to, and there was more time for us. As a family, and so I'm hoping. I'm hopeful for the future here, and you know, I know people have a lot of trepidation around AI, and for good reason. I mean, they're lying to you when they say it's not going to take jobs, just like they lied. I was there 2001 when they lied to me about the World Trade Organization, China. We weren't going to be manufacturing jobs, weren't going to offshore. It was just a lot of lies, and they're lying now. There's going to be tremendous disruption, and it's going to come for people that are in a position that have never faced this before, meaning those who are using their brain in any kind of a white-collar job. They're going to have to either reinvent themselves or find a way to make themselves relevant with AI. My hope is that as we go through this 2 to 3 year period, tremendous disruption, it's on the other side that we come together again as a nation, as a world, and we have great abundance, and we have Bitcoin, and we can somehow transition to a better world.
I agree. Nothing gets fixed until it breaks. It's about to break, so we're going to fix it, and we're going to fix it right. George, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you. Any parting words you want to leave with the Bitcoin community with?
Just you got to be tough. You got to toughen up. I mean, that nothing gets handed to you, even in the Bitcoin world. You got to work your ass off. I mentioned before, we're warriors at heart. If you don't understand that, then you haven't looked at history. I'm reading right now about the Assyrian Empire, which is part of Mesopotamia, just north of the Sumerians. And, they had written history by then, cuneiform. And it tells you a nonstop story of nothing but violence and war and people constantly scrambling for power and assets and resources. What we want to see is a world so abundant that we don't have to be doing that. I don't know if it'll come from a new energy source, whether it'll be fusion. I don't know if it's going to be from this promise I said of AI, which could give us tremendous productivity, but we need to break that cycle. But in the meantime, you got to be tough, and Bitcoin is going to keep you either tough or you are going to fall by the wayside, and you've got to stay focused. One of the best things Taylor ever did was discuss the idea of having laser eyes and being focused. And if you can stay focused, you're going to stack like a smart psychopath. You're going to hodl, not get shaken out, and you're going to create generational wealth. So it's going to be a great future, kids.
That's awesome, George. Thank you. You've inspired me to go buy some more Bitcoin.
Good. It's on sale right now.
Yes, it is. Tell people where they can find you on X, how they can follow you, and then we'll wrap up.
You can just type my name into the internet, George Bodine. I'm the first thing that comes up. And one thing I will say is, if you're on X, make sure that the name that you're following has got a blue check mark. If there's no blue check mark, it's a scammer. And I never talk to people. I never approach people on DMs. I respond to them, but I don't approach people. I don't approach anybody on Instagram or anything like that. If somebody's asking you for something, it's not me, because I don't want anything from you. I just want you to have a great life.
Thank you, George. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Bifederal. We appreciate you coming and joining us today, George, and we look forward to talking to you again in the future.
You too, Paul. It's good talking to you.
Likewise.
So you've heard Bitcoin is the new gold rush by now. As world leaders on all sides have endorsed it as the future of money, and now you're looking to get started, we'll show you how. It's actually easier than you think. First, go to your nearest Bifederal ATM and turn your cash to coin. Bifederal has over 1,200 locations around the country with the highest daily limits. Go to our website, bytefederal.com, to find the nearest ATM to you. Log in to any wallet, then create an account, deposit your US cash, and instantly convert it to Bitcoin. That's it. We are the only US manufacturer and operator in the Bitcoin ATM industry, and our US-based live customer service is second to none. Go on, give it a whirl, and don't get left behind. Click the link below.